One Piece, not something we usually talk about on this channel, mostly because the second you decide to, Toei also decides it's time to give you a proctology exam. However, I think we can get away with it this time. One Piece, being the absolute megalith of anime and manga that it is, has just gotten a live-action adaptation. That's right, 8-hour-long episodes of anime turned real-life actual people has just been birthed into this world like a baby giraffe. And if the thought of that makes you want to curl up into a ball and wait for the inevitable heat death of the universe, you wouldn't be alone. Mostly because live adaptations of manga or anime tend to be, let's see, this is the first 5 minutes of the video, so let's say icky, sticky, doo-doo, poo-poo. There you go, YouTube, eat your heart out. But let's be real, aside from the occasional Japanese-made miracles like the Kenshin live-action films, adaptations like this, we haven't had an actual good one ever. And I don't want to hear the, oh, but what about this one BS. Like, no, let's be real to ourselves. And even if it isn't the Death Note movie or Dragon Ball Evolution, we both know that it's still garbage. You know that, I know that. Let's move forward together. Now with our delusions out of the way, let's think about how someone had the nuts to A, make another one, and B, do it on One Piece. I mean, you gotta be out of your mind to think you can pull that off. Besides being anime and a manga, One Piece is a fandom within itself. I mean, go ahead, go tell a One Piece stan that you ship Nami and Luffy. See what happens to you. Also, you're disgusting and that's wrong. But for real, you don't touch this holy chalice, especially if you're Netflix and are the one who's responsible for the Death Note movie and the Cowboy Bebop series. I mean, how did these people really think that this was going to be okay? I mean, that's absolutely insane. But what's even more insane is the product that came forth, the end result of the horrible amalgamation of Japanese entertainment and Western film. And I'm still coming to grips with it myself, so before I bury the lead, let's get into the One Piece live action series. I have to talk to you guys about my balls. Somehow, our audience has turned to 90% male, which means the majority of you have a couple of cojones hanging behind those inflatable tubes down there. We have been sponsored by Manscaped to help all you out. And honestly, I'm pretty excited about this sponsorship. I have really enjoyed these products. Not only does Manscaped want your big boys to feel good and smooth with their pun intended baller lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is actually pretty fantastic, but they want you to be healthy too. Manscaped is partnered with the Testicular Cancer Society to help spread cancer prevention amongst men, because odds are you're in the 15 to 35 age range where it shows up the most. So make sure to get yourself and your boys checked out when you can, and as a helpful reminder, Manscaped has a special edition lawnmower just for you and your nuts. And honestly, if you care anything about personal grooming, I mean, this thing, like, woo, that works. So save yourself stress and make sure your nuts are chilling at the same time. Keep them well groomed and looking good for whoever you're trying to show them off to. You can use my promo code Bonsai Pop proudly for 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. Keep that package shining and healthy, and help us support ourselves and our editors too. Link in the description. Now back to it. So like I said, I don't really talk about One Piece that much, and mostly because I can't talk about it on YouTube. That doesn't mean I don't love the series. I've read it through twice, including the newest arcs. I am up to date, and I've even watched like 95% of the anime, which has taken up way too much of my lifetime. I even had this whole series planned out for until Toei decided that it was going to carpet bomb our channel. And personal gripes aside, now I can talk about One Piece a little bit, because Netflix understands free advertising. So before we totally dive into this, I'm going to be doing no spoilers, and then I'm going to be going over this series kind of like piece by piece a little bit. But first, I think we should ask ourselves why live action anime is generally so terrible. I think that there is two core reasons. The first is obviously that animation is very difficult to replicate with real people. You need either one of two things, an absolute buttload of money and time, or a lot of CGI, the latter of which is usually the choice, and it generally comes out looking very assy and doesn't age well at all. The second reason is that Hollywood is full of a bunch of greedy rich psychos who think we're all stupid. They take a property beloved loved by a certain group of people and churn out an ingenuous piece of garbage in the name of appealing to everybody. If you hear appealing to everybody as a fan, you know what that means. It means it's going to appeal to everybody except for you, the fan. There are very few examples of actual good adaptations of an original work, including remakes. Again, Disney. Personally, I'd say the Lord of the Rings films from the 2000s are about as close as you can get to the best live adaptations. I mean, it's even a miracle just to get something in the works, and usually by the time it hits production, it's been so wrecked by the higher-ups just picking it apart that it wasn't worth even getting started in the first place. Looking at you, Batman vs. Superman. It takes real love and a lot of leniency to adapt something right. So, how was One Piece? Well, it actually had a few things going for it. Had good writers, and it was overseen by One Piece's creator himself, Eiichiro Oda. Now that isn't always enough though, okay? We had Miyamoto looking over the Mario movie, and that was like an hour and a half of Nintendo references. But One Piece was largely manned by a lot of unknowns. I mean, at least to me. Like 99% of the people that worked on this series don't even have Wikipedia pages. Some of them don't even have IMDb's. And you certainly can't just Google them, you're gonna get a bunch of Facebooks. And even the production studio, Kaji Productions, seems to have only done one other TV series, which was like called Helix. It was back in 2015. The other two studios are better known. We know Shueisha, obviously they publish like all of the shit, but Tomorrow Studios has only done a small series of shows, but one of them was the live-action Cowboy Bebop series, which, if you can't tell by the tone of my voice, was pretty assy itself. Takes a lot of balls to take another shot at that with another masterpiece. So believe me when I say that I cannot believe that the One Piece live action series is pretty good. And by that, I mean it's about as good as it could possibly be given what it is. It's better than The Last of Us. Yes, I said that. Now, is it an option to watch it instead of reading the manga or the anime? Absolutely not. You're not going to get the same kind of story, or at least all of the beats that you would with those original works. I mean, there's just no way that it could possibly replace either of those for somebody new. But given the limitations of the live action format, runtime, and budget, I mean, it really is about as good as you could possibly expect. It's got some minor flaws here and there, but they could be fixed pretty easily. So first thing that we should look at is the cast. For me, they were all unknowns except Makinyu, who plays Zoro, and Vincent Regan, who plays Admiral Garp, the former being in basically every single live-action adaptation of manga in existence, and the latter was in 300, and also like 8 million TV shows. But the rest, especially Luffy, I had no idea about, and when I saw him in the teaser material, I was definitely more than skeptical, but believe it or not, he was actually perfect. I can honestly no longer imagine a better Luffy. His portrayal of being a pig-headed, intense himbo was great, honestly, and he even has the stare. I mean, if you really take a look at Luffy and how he acts, he has a lot of this psychotic energy to him. He has this really intense, maniacal grin on his face and this like big eye stare, you know what I mean? And of course, that giant, stupid grin on his face. It's kind of scary. And Yaki Godoy was an absolute perfect fit. At first, I thought he was straight up Spanish.
It's not gonna be easy. The ocean is pretty big.
But it turns out he's from Mexico City, and in the real world, there were plenty of Hispanic pirates. Him being Mexican honestly fit really well, and I think it even added a little bit to the character. He was absolutely solid throughout the entire show. Now, Zoro, on the other hand, Zoro's a bit rough. They really went out of their way to make him too cool for school, and it definitely came off a little dumb.
You dropped my food. Delicious.
I mean, yeah, Zoro is a badass, but he isn't like a brooding, I'm so cool kind of badass, you know what I mean? In the manga, he has comedy, but he doesn't really quip too much. He likes to eat as much as Luffy. He is a meathead, super strong, and pretty dumb. He doesn't know his left from right. He's got all the himbo minus the everlasting optimism. This Zoro was way too smart and definitely didn't have the demon strength we see in Zoro as an actual character. The way he was portrayed is probably the worst in the entire series, but if he's the worst worst, then we're in pretty good waters because it wasn't that bad. I mean, they even got the sword in his mouth and it was more like, how'd they do that rather than it being cringe? Honestly, it was kind of impressive. If there was one other person I really had beef with, it was Kobe, and yes, that's a joke if you get it. He was always a little bit of a coward in the beginning, but this kid, Morgan Davies, really leaned into being a stuttering, wimpy baby.
Things free about Alvida's crew. She tells me when to eat, when to sleep. I even have to paint her toenails.
So why don't you just leave?
Between that and his posh accent, it was really hard to like him. I don't know, there was something like watery about him. It was, and he gets a ton of screen time, which is a choice we're going to talk about later. Nami was fine, serviceable, Daddy Sanji was great, and Usopp was very good. That we should talk about him and the very specific problem I had with him. You see, working with live action material is a lot different for me than manga or anime. There are so many levels to the production to pick apart, but I figured this would be a great time to talk about costumes. Man, were the costumes so good. And not only were they good, but they were often manga specific or filled with Easter eggs. Even Luffy's shirt when he was a kid is ripped right from the manga. The costumes were also all practical. No CGI Arlong pirates, my friends. Instead, it's full costumes, full makeup, absolutely glorious. I can't sing the costume team's praises enough. They did such a good job, and they should be incredibly proud. Some of these characters are insanely hard to portray and do justice. So in that case, why would you leave out Usopp's nose and his goggles? For real, every other character's son, Sanji, has all their ridiculous accoutrements, from Zeph's crazy mustache to Kuro's finger swords. Speaking of which, Alexander Maniatis did an absolutely perfect job of portraying Kuro. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but like that was really good. But Usopp has three defining features: his nose, his hair, and his goggles. 1 out of 3 is a fail. I don't get it. And Sanji's eyebrows weren't there, but he did smoke a cigarette. It's better than him having a lollipop in his mouth the entire time.
Hey, love a girl who treats me like dirt.
It was just one, but again, we're kind of gonna get to that too. There was also some discrepancy with Zoro's outfit. At one point, he was like, "Man, I want my outfit to be black, man. I'm so pretty and cool." But Zoro, like, he wears a white shirt. He almost always wears a white shirt. Why are you gonna mess with that? It makes no sense when they tried so hard on everything else. I don't get it. But of course, costumes mean nothing without the set. And once again, the sets were fantastic. There were real boats, real actual boats. I mean, if you watched the promotional material, you knew that, but the sets were honestly grand when it came to the show. The Barati, Kaya's mansion, especially her room, Buggy's tent, Axan Morgan's office, Arlong Park, it was all brought to life beautifully. I was honestly so impressed, and I still am. I can't imagine how much it costed, how much time it took to put all of the detail into these set pieces. I mean, it is nuts. There's so many photos and decorations and statues and Easter eggs. It looked like a One Piece theme park come to life. Truly incredible. And one of the things that you get in live action that you don't necessarily get in anime, though things are changing with, a lot of it becoming more CGI, like Demon Slayer, is cinematography. And then of course there's editing as well. Here, I had a few issues. Calling Zack Snyder, we need some post filters, please. Yeah, so while the cinematography kind of shined when it needed to, especially in the fights, it wasn't perfect by any standards. When it was good, it was real good, but when it was bad, it bugged the shit out of me. The first major fight with Iron Hand Morgan and even the one with Alvida, both were fantastic. They had really great action here, good shots. A lot of it was kind of like in one shot style. There was like an edit or a cut here or there that messed it up a little bit, but again, with what we're comparing it to, this was really fantastic. There's a lot of shots that are artistic and well done. However, there were also a lot that were weird and unnecessary. In episode 3, about 6 minutes in, all of a sudden we have a fisheye lens for no reason. So generally the way that fisheye works, if you're not using it to film something like skateboarding, is to kind of express tension or strain or confusion. It's often used when people take hallucinogenics or something like that in a film. But again, here, no reason. It's fisheye on Zoro and Luffy, and then when Nami pops in, it's a normal lens, and then back to Zoro and Luffy with the fisheye again. It makes no sense at all, and I know that's nitpicky, but it bugs me. However, there's more egregious choices than that, which you might have noticed. So let's talk about Bloom Blur and filters. There is more blur in the One Piece live action series than a dying PC monitor. I mean, damn though. If there is any scene focused on any character, basically everything other than them is going to be blurred to death, literally to the point where you don't know what you're looking at. It is ridiculous. Why put so much effort into the sets if you're going to blur them into oblivion? It literally looks like they were shot with an iPhone on portrait mode. And then on top of that, there is a ton of bloom. Tyler, show them what bloom looks like. Yes, there were moments where I had to make sure I was watching in 4K because there was so much bloom I could see artifacting in the image on my screen. And then there were cinematic filters on top of that, which caused more artifacting here and there. Guys, directors, editors, this looks fake and bad. Tyler, show them post filters. This looks bad. Don't do this. Now, I made sure to have the ultimate cinematic experience, right? Closed back 3D headphones, 60-inch 4K TV in the dark. I saw and heard everything. And if you don't believe me, check this out. Throw in some headphones right now. When Buggy's head is taken off here, the audio changes because he's voiced this line in a sound booth.
Yes! The best, Bucky!
Looks like we have something else in common.
The chop fruit.
So yes, I basically noticed everything mostly because I was looking for it. But again, I do want to reiterate that it's not that bad all the time. And when the lighting and color is good, it's great. I mean, if you look at the Buggy fight and his whole operation there when Luffy's not in the tank, because when he's in the tank, you really get some Zack Snyder effects, but all the rest of it is awesome. But if you don't care or don't notice, that's good for you. It doesn't mean it's not there and that it doesn't affect the final product. But I do want to make a note here, by the way, the CGI in this show is relatively infrequent, but when it does appear, obviously you're gonna have to do it with Luffy's powers. It's actually pretty good. There are some parts that are not good, like Shanks' arm here. That's pretty bad. Speaking of which, seeing him use hockey was very cool. But the one thing I have absolutely nothing but praise for, I mean, seriously, this is the absolute best part of the show, is the score.
The One Piece.
It is fantastic. Seriously, above and beyond. They actually incorporated We Are by Hiroshi Kitadani into its major overall motif. But besides that being a nice little Easter egg, I mean, just take my breath away, okay? There's so much mood and multiple motifs. Everything is there. Every character has their own theme. Luffy's music is triumphant and, very Pirates of the Caribbean. Zoro has traditional Japanese flutes. Usopp's got this mandolin thing going on.
No pirate will get past me.
There are no pirates. Haven't been in years.
That's where you're wrong. I know they're coming. Any day now, but you're not.
The Barati is a big band. Sanji is a jazzy trumpet. Arlong mixes in hip-hop beats with the orchestra. And all of these themes will mix together depending on who's on screen. It is mind-blowing how much detail was put into the score. Absolutely mind-blowing. The music, it rises and falls where it needs to. It screeches when there's danger. It gets low when there's sadness or contemplation. It plays to the emotion without saying, here's where you cry, here's where you laugh. It's absolutely perfect. If they ever release this on its own, bet your ass I will have my hands on it immediately. definitely. It is up there with the original Star Wars, Pirates of the Caribbean, and Lord of the Rings. Yes, it is that good. Thank you for not using modern licensed music. This score belongs in an Oscar-worthy movie. I'm serious. It's that good, and the way that they play with it is so cool. So before I get into the story, if you're a One Piece fan wondering if you should watch this or not, I think you should. As long as you don't go in with unrealistic expectations, okay? This is 8 episodes covering 100 chapters of manga, and not everything is going to be in it. It's impossible. Do you know how much money that would take to get everything one-to-one? It's just not gonna happen. Some people have criticized the acting. I don't think it's that bad at all. Even though I don't like the portrayal of Zoro for the first 3/4 of the series, it's not like his acting was bad. He was just not written that well, or at least not that faithfully to his original character. I don't know, it's strange. But it's also important to remember the subject material, which is a goofy comic for young boys. The characters are caricatures, and the actors and directors were able to play into that a bit without making it cringe, which is extremely hard to do. Yes, there's a couple scenes where, you know, Luffy decides to like go, yeah, woo, in like ways that don't really make a lot of sense. You know, he'll be on the prow of the boat or whatever, and you know, yell that kind of out of the blue. It would have been better if they had a shot of him running up onto it, you know, excitedly and then yelling, but it just doesn't make any sense for him to just be sitting on it and then randomly yell. I don't know, whatever. That's like as cringe as it gets, which is totally forgivable. It's also important to note that this is not a show made for kids. You know, there's drinking, there's violence, there's blood, there's even decapitation and dismemberment. It's nice to see that, you know, they aren't just shilling for the kids. Now, if you're not a One Piece fan, I don't really know how you're going to feel about this. You might like it more or you might hate it. I really don't know. For me, watching it as a One Piece fan, a lot of it was spent waiting to see what they were going to do and if they were going to mess it up. For you, you don't know the story, so it might be better that way, or you might be thinking that this series is ridiculous. I know people that haven't read the manga or, you know, watched the anime are checking this out, so I mean, why not? Go for it. But if you do like it, let me know. Also, do not start watching One Piece on Netflix. It is cropped all to hell. Go to Crunchyroll, watch it there. I don't care if you watch it dubbed or subbed, whatever sounds better to you. But yeah, I don't know what version of the show they got on Netflix, but it is brutally cropped. But the fact that I don't know if you're gonna like it is kind of a good thing, because it again shows that this was made for fans. But if you do like it, I highly recommend reading the manga instead of watching the anime. It's not that the anime is bad, you're just going to be watching it for the rest of your life. You can kind of control the pace through the manga. The Shonen Jump app is $3 and you get like 1,100 chapters of the series. You know, it's a good deal. But with that all of the way, we're going to get on to the story. So if you don't want to be spoiled, you can go watch it and then come back and see what I think about it. But if you know One Piece, you know the story basically. However, again, there has to be some creative license, given that they're covering 100 chapters of manga in 8 hours. There's just no way around that, and I think overall they did a pretty decent job. There are some weird choices, but we're gonna talk about them. They didn't ruin the show. They're just weird, like Usopp's nose. Again, I mean, look at this guy. He's got the smallest fucking nose in the entire show. Anyway, of course, you're going to have your early stuff. You got Luffy in the barrel, you got Kobe, you got the Alvida pirates landing on the island with Captain Morgan, but then you also have this scene with Zoro and number 7 from Baroque Works out of nowhere in episode 1. I mean, it's an interesting tease, but why is it here? Also, once again, it's like, I feel like it's just there to show how cool Zoro is. Like, Zoro's a cool dude, you know, he's so cool. And then Luffy gets to watch Zoro fight and get arrested in the bar instead of just finding him tied up as a prisoner in the Marine camp. Also, Nami is there. And the rest of the episode is relatively on track, but I would like to point out that Morgan's metal jaw looks super goofy and cheap. And also, Luffy and Nami meet early and fight together with Zoro against the Marines. And these are all little things that don't really matter too much, except that Luffy and Nami steal the map of the Grand Line there, which means Buggy didn't steal it. So in this world, Buggy goes after the Straw Hats instead. And Buggy is actually awesome though. They did a really good job with him, and his makeup, his hair, everything is super on point. They managed to make him funny and a little bit threatening. His episode was pretty great all around and gives newcomers a better explanation of how seawater works on people with devil fruit powers. But there's no Buggy Ball though, which is a big Buggy bummer. But we do get to see the Gum Gum Bazooka Oda, so that's a plus, and not all of Buggy's pirates had their time to shine, but some did. Kabaji, for instance, has a more interesting part that's tied to Zoro. It's also important that I mention the other through lines, though, that weave in and out of the story. First, you have Luffy's past, which is pretty one-to-one. They don't really lean in on the eating thing too much, though. You know, Luffy's like classic insatiable appetite, and this is kind of a bummer, and it also makes it strange that Luffy just randomly eats the devil fruit he found. It would make a lot more sense if he was eating more or like ravenously when he did eat, but instead he just like opens the thing and he's like, this looks edible. But on the other hand, Garp eats like a madman. I mean, homeboy is destined for blood pressure medication. But speaking of Garp, him, Kobe, and Helmeppo, who I actually really ended up liking by the end of the series, have a story all their own. There's a lot more emphasis put on them in the series, and I didn't really mind any of it. I think if you were going to add more to the story or character growth and development, Kobe and Garp are a really good choice. Their story always runs parallel with Luffy's in the manga, as does everybody's, but we only get snippets of it as time goes on. And honestly, it's pretty interesting to get a more detailed view of what they're doing behind the scenes like this, especially knowing that Oda was supervising, so obviously it's not complete bullshit. And I wasn't sure what they were going to do with Garp in the end, given his whole arc here, but I wasn't disappointed. So essentially each character gets 2 episodes, except Luffy and Zoro, who are kind of spread throughout. In these episodes we get the characters' backstories and, you know, their eventual joining up with Luffy's crew, but I think out of all of them, Usopp got done pretty dirt. Now, I generally dislike Usopp. He's often more annoying than anything else, and the Syrup Village arc is pretty boring, but I mean, they really gave the guy nothing here. He barely does anything in the entire show except brag, which, you know, that is his personality, but to be fair, he is funnier in the show than he is in the manga, and it's just like taken a lot better, and that part's not so bad, but instead they took away his friends, they made his backstory simple and also hilarious, and leaned into his romance with Kaya. His backstory is easily the most dropped part of this series. He gets in trouble for lying, he gets brought home, and then his mom just dies. Like, there's almost no explanation for it. I was dying, dude. I was laughing my ass off. And unfortunately, young Usopp did a really bad job. I mean, you know, you're gonna have child actors, but this... Sorry, kid. And there's also no Django, which I thought was super weird. Like, you're gonna have Sham and Butchie, but no Django, bro? Come on, he was the best part of this arc. There's also a bit where Nami kind of plays therapist to Kaya, which was kind of cringe. It's not that bad, but Emily Rudd has a pretty difficult time pulling it off. I don't really think it's her character, and it is basically a little bit disingenuous. There's also the Kaya slap, so they got that important part in, but it's less dramatic given the situation and how it all plays out here. And they also telegraph the poisoning way out front. Jacob Gibson, who plays Usopp, does a really good job. There's nothing wrong with his acting. It's just the writing of his couple episodes was not in his favor. Basically, it's the same-ish story, but Mary straight up dies, which kind of had me bugging. And then, okay, right, so like, get this. This is super dumb. Zoro gets hit over the head with a bottle, like during a confrontation, right? And these dumbasses think that's going to kill him, so they dump him and Mary's body in the well, right? With his swords, which is just like so dumb. I mean, there's multiple parts in this show where Zoro's like kidnapped and his swords are left right there. I don't know, whatever. And then after that, in the next episode, for a half hour, okay, not straight, obviously there's other things going on in between, but for a half hour, this dude is trying to climb out of the well with, again, these Zack Snyder like nighttime filters, and he's remembering his past. And I'm like, oh my god, dude, this is Batman 3. This is literally Batman 3. You can't make this shit up. He's going up the well, and halfway up, I'm like, dude, if he falls, I'm gonna shit myself. And then boom, he falls down to the ground again, just like fucking, dude, just like Batman. Like, if you were going to rip off anything, don't rip off Batman 3. Anyway, after Zoro gets his ass out of the well, there's the big confrontation with Kuro, and just Kuro is so perfect. Everything about him was done just so well. The acting was really good, and the costume, like, I didn't know how they were going to do the finger swords, but not only did they do them, they did them well. And like I said, the actor who played Kuro, I mean, it was literally manga panel perfect, the way that he stood and how he adjusted his glasses, and I was really blown away by his performance. It was very good. So they save Kaya, and then they're just like, Usopp's part of the crew now. He didn't do anything, but that's fine. I honestly really don't know. Maybe it was because they straight up acknowledged that Usopp, who we do get to see in a really awesome fight scene, by the way, is Usopp's dad, and Luffy knows how rad Usopp is, so he just assumes Usopp's gonna be the same. I don't know, but whatever. There's also no like, I'm gonna be captain in my own ship and go off. Like, it's just like the Captain Usopp thing is kind of a joke here, where like Usopp was actually kind of serious in the manga. Again, whatever. I mean, nothing is, it's not gonna be perfect, okay? Now Sanji's arc, excuse me, Daddy Sanji's arc was at least a little bit better done. The Brody was awesome. The guy, the daddy who plays Daddy Sanji is great. His whole relationship with Zeph was very well done. His backstory was accurate, and I was even wondering if Zeph was going to eat his leg, and he did, which, good job. Don't pull punches. Obviously, you can tell from what I've been saying, the guy who plays Sanji, Taz Skylar, is an incredibly handsome Chad. But one of the things that was really interesting was like I was having trouble figuring out his accent. I was like, is he like French with like a mix of some Cockney in there? But he's actually Spanish. He's half Spanish, half English, so that's why you get that interesting mix. But I really liked him. I thought he was a great pick, and I thought he did a very good job with Sanji. A really weird choice though was to have the pirate armada not be a major fight or kind of in the show at all. Instead, they show Mihawk killing all of them before being assigned by Garp to capture Luffy. He does get his fight with Zoro. He even pulls out like his little like sword cheese knife, which is funny, like on the cross and stuff. The fight was pretty good, and then, you know, Mihawk leaves as expected. There's a little bit more of him being like, oh, Luffy, there's something about Luffy. However, what's more interesting is there's a solid explanation of the warlords of the sea and the corruption of the Marines early in, which I felt was kind of strange, but I didn't have any issues with it. It's just interesting that they're giving out all of this information. Luffy's more emotional point is done well with Zoro being injured and things kind of falling apart. You know, he has to take a look inside himself and decide what a captain really is. And Nami also reads The Unconscious Swordsman, the story of Nolan, which I thought was a pretty awesome little Easter egg. Hopefully, I mean, I imagine if this show goes all the way to Skypiea, guys. Imagine that, that'd be crazy. But there's also a bit of a mix-up with Nami at this point, right? You expect her to take off to Arlong and leave the guys. It's even telegraphed, but she doesn't until Arlong actually shows up at the Barati, which obviously he doesn't in the manga. And I thought this was a pretty clever and quick way to move on to Arlong Park, but the problem is that this doesn't give Sanji much time to become intimate with the crew. They tried, but without the pirate armada threatening the Barati and Sanji's awesome fights with that pirate crew, it doesn't make as much sense when they're just like, you're on the ship now. I mean, obviously they needed a cook a lot more than they needed Usopp, so there is a little bit more sense in this case. They did what they had to, I guess. It's just unfortunate we didn't get to see the fighting cooks or, you know, all the drama that took place during Sanji's entrance arc. But then we get Arlong Park, and man, to this day, it is still one of the best mini arcs in the entire series. It gets me every single time. And I was even like, I'm not gonna cry here, guys. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. There's no way I'm gonna get emotional with this show. But you know, I got some tinglies. I got some, like, you know, maybe you can get some tears. I really wasn't sure if they were gonna nail it, but like with the rest of the series, they honestly did a good job, at least as good a job as they could have. Not that I don't have one major gripe, of course. So we get the Nami betrayal thing, we get her backstory, but honestly, they did Bellamere kind of fucking dirt too. In the manga, she is badass, tattoos, cool hair, punk ex-military chick basically. And she has the hair in the show, but she's kind of portrayed as a middle-aged coward. The acting and choice of cast is pretty wonk for her in my opinion. When she's on the battlefield looking for the girls, I mean, that is the fakest limp I've ever seen. And then when Arlong attacks the village, she does this like little scream thing and kind of scrambles away with Nami. It was super lame. And then her sacrificing herself goes wrong because the whole idea of her feeling very strongly about them all being a real family didn't come off very well before. It definitely wasn't emphasized enough. It was kind of messy, which may disrupt new viewers' feelings about the whole relationship dynamic between Nami and her sister and Bellamere in the first place. And honestly, that kind of sucks. But honestly, when we get Nezumi taking the money away and Nami realizes that Arlong has betrayed her and screwed her over and all of her life's work is totally going down the drain, I mean, Emily Rudd killed that acting. It was so good.
No! You can't do this! You can't do this!
You could totally feel the absolute despair in her performance. It was some great acting. And then of course you get the iconic scene where she finally asks Luffy for help and he puts his hat on her head. It was really cool. I was grinning so hard. Absolutely loved it. And then you get that manga superhero feeling there without any cringe. And the score comes in and it plays Luffy, and then it plays a little bit of Zoro, then plays some Sanji, then it plays some Usopp, and it just flows into each other. It was perfect.
Let's go! Right!
And of course it all comes down to the fight at Arlong Park, which wasn't as awesome as I had hoped, but it was still pretty good. You finally get the real dynamic between Sanji and Zoro, but in this series, Zoro calls Sanji waiter because he doesn't have his eyebrows, no bushy brows, but honestly, I kind of like this better. I think it's really funny. But no Hachi? For real? For fucking real, dog? Like, you're gonna cut him out? How are you gonna do my boy like that? Hachi is so important to that mini arc and the rest of the manga. I mean, yes, he would have been hard to insert with practical costumes, but you gotta have Hachi, dude. I don't understand this choice, specifically because of my next point. This whole season felt like a teaser. I think that they knew it was good, and I think that they were already planning for more. It felt like this was their way of introducing all the characters, getting their narrative going, showing off the world a bit, and next time it's going to be nuts because they have all the time in the world to show off the characters being themselves. How they plan to do that and how much it's going to mess with the story, I don't know. But we get that teaser of Smoker at the end, so we know at least one guy who's going to show up. But leaving out Django and Hachi, plus more than a few others who repeatedly show up later, calls into question how long they actually plan to do the series and how far off course they're going to take it. But enough speculation. The Fishman Karate versus Zoro and Sanji in this, because no Hachi, was pretty okay, and the Arlong fight with Luffy, I'd say it was solid. We don't get to see a ton of Fishman action. We get to see a ton of Fishmen getting sliced and diced by Zoro, but the most we really got of the Fishmen and their powers was with Usopp when he straight up murdered that guy. But during the big fight, Arlong didn't even bite Luffy. You know what I mean? Like, Luffy really seemed to have the upper hand the whole time, which is fine, I guess, but I think Arlong deserved a bit more time to really put the Straw Hats under some pressure. You know, maybe cut out a little bit more of Kobe and Garp and make the final fight a little bit more intense. It all felt too easy, but all the right beats were hit. You got the Gum Gum battle axe, you know, Arlong Park crumbling into itself, but the suspense wasn't really there. But maybe the point of that was to show how small fry the East Blue is with Garp afterwards. Like I was talking about before, they mess with Garp a bunch, but he shows up at Cocoa Village in the end where he beats the shit out of Luffy. And if he can do that, he could have easily killed Arlong. I think that's what they're trying to show. Because in the end, One Piece is nothing if not a there's always a bigger fish story. But Garp, being the good guy we all hoped he still was, sends Luffy off on his voyage with a kind of approval/warning. And afterwards we get that classic end of arc bounty poster viewing that shows all the friends we made along the way, as well as the barrel pledge. Though you'd be crazy if you didn't think I was going to be pissed that the Straw Hats didn't run from Cocoa Village like they do every time they finish up a battle, you know, because they're pirates. That was a big bummer. But all said and done, I mean, minus some gripes I have with the sanctimonious way they treated Usopp and Sanji coming on board, and the poor cinematography here and there, and editing choices, I mean, damn. Series was good. Definitely enough for me to look forward to and watch season 2. So with 5 being a perfectly serviceable television show, and 10 being the best show of all time, 1 being absolute complete garbage, I give One Piece live action a 6 out of 10. It is better than average, but with lots of room for improvement and cleaning up some of those rough edges. And with most anime live adaptations getting 1s and 2s, this is absolutely my highest praise so far. And no, I'm not fun to go to the movies with, and yes, this is how I watch things. But what did you think? I'm off Twitter or forever, so I don't really know what people are saying about the show, which is kind of nice, because I can just love and hate things all I want without listening to people cry all day. Did you think it was good? Was it too different for you? Is this, you know, your entrance into One Piece world? You think there's going to be a season 2? Let me know in the comments. I thought it was important that we do a video on this. We have a big video coming in 2 weeks, so I hope to see you there. Also, final note, the snail phones were complete eldritch horrors. Those things are going to live in my dreams forever. Thanks for watching.